Tonight, we know where you're hiding. Donald Trump's threat to Iran's supreme leader. The US president intervened after a fifth night of missile exchanges with businesses and buildings damaged in Israel. And targets hit in Iran too as Washington contemplates its next move. Prime Minister Keir Starmer insists there will be no impending American strike.
Do you know what's going on?
Well, I don't think you should read into that an American attack is imminent.
As one conflict escalates in Ukraine, a deadly attack on the capital described by its leader as pure terrorism. And in Gaza, more than 50 people killed while waiting for aid after Israeli troops reportedly fired on a crowd. 3 conflicts with no sign of peace. What happens next, for better or for worse, could be determined by one man. So is Donald Trump all talk, or is he up to the job? That's all coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Let's bring in our Mark Stone now, who joins us from the White House. And Mark, we know that the cabinet meeting that Donald Trump has convened has just ended. And I want to get your take in terms of whether the feeling is that Donald Trump is suddenly inserting himself into this because he can see the direction of travel.
Do you know, Yalda, I think the truth is no one knows. He has intentionally made all this so ambiguous, so difficult to read. He is creating a sense of drama, yes, of tension, yes, maximum pressure, Trump style, the art of the deal, but applied now to this hugely delicate geopolitical moment, the most critical moment for the region. In decades, without question. He does appear to be more interested in well, it depends. You know, Yalda, whether you read one of his Truth Social posts, you could be drawn to the conclusion that he is now more comfortable with going in to Iran in one way or another. No one's talking about ground troops, but involving the Americans in what is at the moment overtly an Israeli operation. And interestingly, if you go down that track and believe that that maybe is what he's doing, it is interesting to note that domestically here, there is a kind of moulding of the narrative. Remember, Donald Trump has presented himself for so long as the peacemaker, as the man who wants fewer wars, not more wars, the man who is not going to embroil America into more foreign conflicts. That was his campaign pledge. And as recently as a couple of weeks ago, as I said, in the Middle East, he was saying we're not getting involved in the Middle East anywhere. And to that point, it is interesting that his vice president, J.D. Vance, in a message which I think was focused towards the base, to America, to the MAGA base, effectively said, look, listen carefully to what the president is saying, because he's been consistent. He's always said Iran can't have a nuclear weapon, and he said that they can end this the easy way or the hard way. And then J.D. Vance finishes by effectively saying the president will make his decisions, and the inference is we must get behind whatever decision the president comes to. But then against that, we hear the news last night, leaked to Axios, very well sourced, very intentionally leaked, that Steve Witkoff, Donald Trump's Middle East envoy, is ready and prepared to meet with the Iranian foreign minister. So what to believe? This is very, it's fascinating. And I think even the world leaders in Canada do not quite know where this will end up.
Yeah, and how this administration is managing to, deal with this crisis, because we're 6 months into this administration, and it's one of its first major crises. And I guess the question then is, what options are on the table for the Americans? Because certainly from Israel's perspective, they want the Americans to be completely and directly lured into this. Benjamin Netanyahu did a series of interviews with American channels yesterday, trying to appease to Donald Trump's ego and saying that we need his leadership, and this is not just a war that we're fighting for ourselves, but we're fighting this for the American people, the Western world. This is not just a threat to the streets of Tel Aviv, but it could also be a threat to New York.
I saw and was reminded and watched a clip yesterday that Benjamin Netanyahu gave when he was here in Congress back in 2002. Yes, he was an Israeli leader back then as well. Sitting behind him was Ron Dermer, who is still his closest aide. And back then in 2002, a year before the invasion of Iraq, Benjamin Netanyahu told Congress here in the United States that Saddam Hussein should be overthrown, there should be regime change, and that peace and prosperity would be the result of removing Saddam Hussein from power. Look how that ended up. I think, fast forward however many years now, we know that there is kind of a fine line between masterstrokes of diplomacy and diplomatic ineptitude. And I don't know which side of that line Donald Trump falls at the moment. In terms of the options, well, America has the bunker busters. America has the ability to destroy Iran's nuclear capability to the extent that there is one. Israel said it's on the brink. Others have said it is absolutely not. There's a legal question to be argued out there, certainly. But they have the capability, if they wanted to, Trump has it if he wants to supply those bunker busters or to put American planes in the skies above Iran and drop massive bombs to end that. They also, clearly from what he said in his social media post, they know where the supreme leader is. They can kill him, Trump's words, if they want to. So maximum pressure, anyone's guess as to which way this will go.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, thank you, as always, for all of your analysis there. Now, Israel has made no secret of wanting to target Iran's supreme leader directly. And today, there was another barely veiled threat from the defense minister here. He said Ali Khamenei could face the same fate as Saddam Hussein, who was hanged at trial after his toppling in the US-led invasion of Iraq. And as more threats were exchanged, so too were drone and missile attacks. Sky's Cordelia Lynch reports from Tel Aviv.
Tel Aviv's skyline and the familiar sounds of an Iranian salvo. Another wave of missiles in a conflict with no clear off-ramp. One that's playing out on people's doorsteps, here quite literally. This is Zema in central Israel and the smoking remains of an Iranian attack. Israel also seems far from backing down. This strike in Isfahan, and it's claiming to have killed Iran's new wartime chief of staff too, destroying the new guard days after taking out the old, and not ruling out toppling the supreme leader either.
I came here to strengthen the residents of Herzliya and to send a clear message to the dictator in Tehran, Khamenei. If you continue to commit acts of war and launch missiles at the civilian population in Israel, your fate will be exactly like that of the dictator in the neighboring country to Iran, whose end is well known.
A veiled warning he could meet the same fate as Saddam Hussein, Iraq's former leader. Tehran is talking tough too. The state broadcaster defiantly celebrating a return to the studio on the same day it was bombed. Iran claims it's also hit military and intelligence targets in Israel. Israel has yet to respond, and the military has banned any broadcast of those sites. But not ones like this, civilian, and it would appear unintended. A bus parking lot in Herzliya. In one strike, Amar says he lost his life's work. Do you fear this conflict with Iran?
We need peace. We need to work. We need to live like humans, not in war. The last 2 years, all we can do is follow the news and worry about the future of the country.
The missile hit here in the morning. It felt like a slight shift in rhythm. Most people we've been speaking to have come to expect attacks overnight, but this caught some off guard. It's perhaps part of a broader psychological strategy by Iran to make Israel look exposed. But the Iranian regime still looks firmly on the back foot. On the ground, there are no signs of capitulation or compromise, and plenty of scope for miscalculation. Cordelia Lynch, Sky News, Tel Aviv, Israel.
Well, one of Israel's main targets in Iran is a nuclear facility built into a mountain deep underground. To destroy it, Israel would need American help in the form of a 13-ton bomb. Here's our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn.
If the United States is to join in with this war, then there's a fair bet it will involve the Fordo nuclear facility. It is Iran's most heavily protected nuclear location, 20 miles northeast of the holy city of Qom. It's an obvious and important target for Israel's attacks, although observers say there are no visible signs of damage there so far. It's a top-secret hideaway, and it's in remote terrain. The main part of the facility is built into a mountain with tunnels leading deep underground. There are few signs of activity above ground, with one support building and a fortified, secure perimeter. The main enrichment halls are buried deep below the surface, too deep for any Israeli bombs to penetrate. The nuclear watchdog, the IAEA, recently suggested Iran has increased production of enriched uranium to 60% at Fordo. The more enriched uranium they have, the more likely that Iran will be able to produce a nuclear weapon. So if their own aerial bombs won't be enough to totally destroy Fordo, what other options do the Israelis have?
The cleanest option would be to ask the United States Air Force to finish the job there. Another option would be to negotiate with the Iranians about the future of Fordo, maybe in exchange for a ceasefire agreement. The Iranians would agree to disable it themselves. The Israelis could also send in a commando team.
If the United States was to help Israel bomb Fordo, what would they be using? The answer is almost certainly the MOP, the Massive Ordnance Penetrator, officially known as the GBU-57. It's America's largest non-nuclear bomb, a bunker buster designed to blast its way through layers of rock and reinforced concrete to obliterate its target. The bomb itself weighs 13 tons, and each one could penetrate up to 60 metres below the surface. Because of its size, it can only be carried by America's B-2 stealth bombers. So if we see more B-2s heading towards the region, that may be a sign that something is about to happen. There are also reports of a lot of US aircraft on the move, F-15 and F-16 fighter jets and their refuelling planes heading from bases in Europe towards the Middle East. Is President Trump preparing for this conflict to widen? Or is he using military might to force Iranians to accept peace on his terms and promise never again to build the bomb? Because experts say whatever Israel does to Fordo, destroying it would only set Iran's nuclear ambitions back by 5 years or perhaps a few more. Ending its nuclear plans for good would require defeat on crushing terms dictated by America and Israel, or the end of the regime, or perhaps even both.
That's Dominic Waghorn, our international affairs editor. Well, throughout this 5-day conflict, Iran's leaders have insisted they have no intention of building a bomb. That's even though the country is reported to have enriched uranium up to 60%, requiring only a short technical step to reach weapons grade 90%. Iran's ambassador to the UK told me Sunday that Tehran had followed the rules. And that's what he said as he gave evidence to the Commons Foreign Affairs Committee. Have a listen.
There is no any intention from our side going to enrich to the level of the nuclear bomb. Israeli regime used this pretext to attack us. But yes, regarding for your question, I'm telling you, every activities of the Iranian, Iranian Atomic Energy Organization are peacefully. There is no. You can ask the sophisticated questions with the experts.
It's the Iranian ambassador to the UK. You're watching The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Still to come, more on what next for Iran and Israel. And Ukraine's president accuses Russia of pure terrorism after one of Kiev's worst attacks yet.
So direct hit on the hospital. Absolutely
All the bays are full and they're all gunshot wounds. Absolute carnage here.
We hear a lot about the dead in this conflict, but there are going to be so many disabled people.
We could make a difference here and stop the war, and if we don't, I don't think there will be anything to come back to.
Turkey is burying its dead.
Whole families died in this collapse. Generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
Anyone could say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News, get the full story first.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach.
This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Welcome back. We've been talking tonight about the choices Donald Trump can make in Washington: diplomacy, assassination or bombs. Israel has all but wiped out Iran's top leadership structure over the last few days. Let's just take a look. Well, during Israel's first wave of attacks, several senior military commanders, advisors and nuclear scientists were killed or critically wounded. These men were part of the Supreme Leader's inner circle of roughly 15 to 20 advisors, which has been hollowed out over the last few days. Since Israel has continued picking off more within the command structure, including the Brigadier General Mohammad Kazemi and his deputy. And today, the IDF claimed to have killed one of the commanders brought in as a replacement, the wartime Chief of Staff Ali Shadmani. So, what will be their next move? Well, let's bring in Yossi Kapowasa, who is the former Director General of the Israeli Ministry of Strategic Affairs. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us here on the program. I guess the question at this point is, how does this all end? What do you see as sort of success for Israel?
Good evening. Well, a success would be if Iran would not have the capability to have a nuclear program and give it up, and would not have the capability to produce ballistic missiles that can reach Israel. And probably if this would also lead to some sort of commitment by Iran to be under some sort of verification system that would make sure that this is the case, and that we don't have to fly again and again to Tehran in order to prevent them from having these capabilities, then this is going to be a satisfactory situation for us.
Does that then also include regime change as far as Israel is concerned? Because, of course, we are now discussing this very openly after the leaks that we saw a few days ago, where there were reports that President Trump had vetoed this. Now President Trump is talking about it quite openly in statements he's making. Benjamin Netanyahu has addressed the issue and said it's not correct and he doesn't want to do it. I spoke to the Israeli president yesterday, who said the war cabinet is talking about this. Is regime change now firmly on the cards as well?
Regime change is something that we really want to see happening in Iran, and not only us. The people of Iran would like to see that happening too. But it's not one of the goals of this war. It's up to the Iranian people to decide who is going to lead them. And if they want to go and topple their own regime, that would be very nice, because that's going to guarantee that they would have better life, and that would guarantee stability for the Middle East and better security for everybody around the globe.
From your perspective, certainly speaking to Israeli officials over the last few days, they see these operations as a success. They have complete air superiority. They've hit the top commanders and leaders of the regime. They've hit nuclear and military facilities. But they've also killed several hundred civilians in Iran. Yesterday, we talk through the names of some of these civilians, poets, Pilates teachers, activists and artists. Is this the right message that Israel is sending to the Iranian people, that they are going to target civilians in these operations as well?
This is ridiculous, we don't aim at civilians. We are trying to convince civilians to leave the areas where they're going to be in harm's way. That's why we issue all warning to the civilians to leave places where we are going to take action. So this
We've
is ridiculous.
still seen several hundred civilians dead, though.
Yes, this is war. Maybe there are civilians dead because if they don't evacuate the places that we ask them to evacuate, they might be hit, and that's a pity. But we are definitely not trying to hit any civilian. On the contrary, we are trying to help the Iranian people. What's happening is that the Iranians launch rockets and missiles in our direction in order to hit civilians, and they are very proud of hitting the civilians. So that's a totally opposite situation. We have nothing against the Iranian people. As a matter of fact, we are doing that also for them to have a better life. That's our purpose. We've been friendly with the Iranian people for many years. I have many Iranian friends. There's no problem between us and the Iranian people.
Do you also want to see the United States now directly involved in this conflict?
We don't want to see the United States directly involved. We issued this war without their involvement. But they are considering the potential involvement of the Americans in one case, which is the Fordow deep underground facility that is still can be used by the Iranians in order to enrich uranium to military grade. We have to remember that this facility was built for that purpose. And this is a small facility built only for enriching uranium for military purposes. And they have there a lot of advanced centrifuges deep underground, and the Americans have developed a special weapon destined only for that purpose, to hit Fordow. They produced this weapon back in 2012, and it's waiting for being used in this respect. We cannot use this weapon because we don't have the necessary bomber in order to do that. So that's something that the Americans may decide that they want to do it themselves. If they are not going to do it, we shall find other ways to deal with the Fordow facility, but they have a much better way to do that.
Yossi Kapowasa, thank you very much for joining us here on the program.
Thank you.
Well, let's get the potential Iranian perspective to all of this. Vali Nasser, a professor at Johns Hopkins University and former senior U.S. State Department advisor, joins me now. Thank you so much for joining us, Vali. Of course, we also have to say that you've authored the book Iran's Grand Strategy, including a number of other reports and books over the years. But Vali, I just want to take your sort of take and reading on the current situation. We keep hearing from the Israelis, and we've heard some Iranian officials speak, but from your perspective, what is the regime thinking at the moment, and is the idea of surrender even on the cards for them?
I think the regime is basically keeping its head above the water. It was shocked by the attack, and it's also obviously lost control of its airspace. It's witnessing both attacks on its military sites, nuclear sites, but is also facing a systematic effort by Israel to degrade state institutions and make the state unable to govern. So attacking civilian sites, refineries, electrical grid, sending message to Iranian people of Tehran to evacuate the city, hitting various civilian targets around the city, television stations, ministries, etc., is all designed to overwhelm the state. So this is a two-pronged attack. One is on the nuclear facilities and one is on the state itself. And so I think the Iranians are trying to see how they can manage this attack, whether they can survive this blitzkrieg. And then now there's a threat of obviously the United States coming in, which complicates things. I don't think they're ready to surrender because surrender essentially has a high cost domestic politically. And also it's not very clear what is it that the United States is giving in return for the surrender.
Yeah, and also, what is the plan? Because I'm not sure. We keep hearing that Israel potentially wants regime change. At the moment, it appears like it is regime destruction, but no real plan for what might come next. So, is it that Israel actually wants regime change and wants, Iran to work towards that, or is it just decapitating this particular regime?
I think it's more than that. It's not just decapitating this regime. It's making Iran smaller, weaker, a state that is shrunk in terms of its capacity. Israel wants once and for all to deal with the Iran problem. It's not only the regime that's ruling Iran, but the potential of whatever the next regime in Iran could do as a regional power. It's an opportunity for them to make Iran a much lesser force in the region. And ultimately, the word regime change has positive connotations. Like you want to remove a regime and make something better. I don't think that's Israel's concern. Israel's concern is the collapse of the Iranian state, not just even the regime. And actually, many Iranians are now worried that Israel's plan is Syriafication of Iran. In other words, you degrade the capacity of the state to such a point where it basically becomes a failed state. And then it's not a threat to Israel. It might be a threat to the United States or to the Gulf countries, but Iran does not have a border with Israel, and a failed state in Iran basically will remove the Iran threat to Israel altogether.
We saw what happened to Iraq after the invasion of the country in 2003. As we saw, the regime change that took place, and then, of course, for over almost 2 decades, we've seen that Iraq is still struggling to get on its feet. Are you concerned about how that could actually unfold in Iran? And is the Iranian system weaker or stronger than the Saddam Hussein system?
The Iranian system is stronger. It's much more resilient, but Iran is also a larger country. And what worries many Iranians today, I've spoken to people inside the country, is that regardless of whether they support the government, they don't support the government, what they think, what really worries them is that the degradation of the state will make Iran weaker, would make it much more difficult to govern the country. It would create chaos. And ultimately, Iranians have watched what happened to Syria, what happened to Iraq, what happened to Libya. They're not thinking about a sort of a democratic outcome out of this. What really worries them is keeping the country in one piece.
Vali Nasser, always good to talk to you. Thank you so much for all of your analysis and thoughts there.
Thank you.
We've just got some breaking news that's coming in from our partner channel, NBC. As we were reporting earlier, the national security team inside the Situation Room have been meeting with President Trump, and multiple current and former administration officials are saying that President Trump is considering a range of options, including a possible U.S. strike on Iran. So that's just coming in from NBC News, saying following that national security meeting that President Trump had in the Situation Room, we understand that a range of options, including a possible U.S. strike on Iran, could potentially be on the table. You're watching The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Lots more coming up on the program, including another attack on Palestinians trying to get some food in Gaza.
gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Welcome back to the programme. We're just going to step away from the Iran-Israel conflict and take you to Ukraine now, where Russia today flattened part of a Kyiv apartment block in its deadliest attack on the capital this year. Several other cities were hit too in a barrage described by President Zelensky as pure terrorism. It happened as he headed to Canada's G7 summit, hoping to meet Trump, who'd left early. Our US correspondent James Matthews reports from the summit in Alberta.
This was the entry into the G7 summit of Ukraine's president, and a welcome from his Canadian host. No smiles, no wonder. Because this is what he'd left behind. Overnight, an apartment block was among targets hit in Kyiv, as Russia launched one of its biggest attacks on his capital since war started. More than 400 drones were fired. This picture captures one before it hit its target. There were multiple fatalities.
Our families had a very difficult night. One of the biggest attacks from the very beginning of this war. It's important for our soldiers to be strong at the battlefield, to stay strong out until Russia will be ready for the peace negotiations. We are ready for the peace negotiations, unconditional ceasefire. I think it's very important, but for this we need pressure.
For the wartime president among G7 members, this was the picture of unity. This wasn't. Donald Trump's departure the night before. The world's biggest economies spoke of maximum pressure on Russia. Without the biggest economy of all, it's a maximum pressure minimized.
You know, sanctions cost us a lot of money.
The G7 heard Trump sidestep sanctions before he left. They showed up the strategy, one short. G7 members here have revealed new sanctions against Moscow. The UK has announced a set of 30 to target Russian finance, its energy sector, and its military. It is a significant move by a departing G7 to tackle a world conflict, albeit undermined by an absent president, distracted with another. James Matthews, Sky News, in Kananaskis, Alberta.
Let's just remind you now of another war, and that's the one raging in Gaza, where health officials say more than 50 Palestinians were killed today while waiting for food trucks. Now, it happened in Khan Yunis in southern Gaza. Many hundreds of people are said to have been injured. The Israel Defense Forces acknowledged several casualties after troops opened fire and says an investigation is underway into what happened. It doesn't appear to be linked to a new Israeli and US-backed aid delivery network that's been marred by chaos and violence. Yesterday, at least 34 Palestinians were killed near one of the network's new distribution centres near Rafah. Our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle reports.
The world's focus might now be on Israel's war with Iran, but Israel's other war on Gaza hasn't let up for a moment. Today, once again, dozens were killed as they waited for aid. Claimed they were targeted by Israeli artillery. The IDF said they opened fire when a crowd approached soldiers. Hundreds more were wounded. They were taken to Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, one of the only functioning hospitals left in southern Gaza. Many had to be treated on the floor. The hospital is overwhelmed with casualties. Streaks of blood covered the tiles. There are not enough bandages and medical equipment to cope with the number of wounded.
We were waiting for aid, over 50,000 civilians, when 2 mortars fell in the center of the crowd. The number of martyrs is overwhelming. No one is able to reach them for treatment.
An American doctor recently arrived in Gaza described what he was seeing.
The first couple of days, we were seeing a lot of isolated injuries, head or chest or abdomen. But today, it's reported that tanks have been used at the food distribution centers, which makes sense because we're seeing multi-trauma. We're seeing head, neck, chest, abdomen, extremities, many, many deaths. And it just doesn't have to be this way. You know, this is something that's just got to stop.
Little aid is getting into Gaza, sometimes only 40 or 50 trucks a day. Palestinians have to walk through Israeli military-controlled areas to get food from distribution centres. Shootings have happened almost daily. It is a dangerous journey to get basic needs. But they have no choice. The war with Iran seems to have ended any hope of an imminent ceasefire in Gaza. It has distracted foreign governments and therefore eased international pressure on Israel to agree an urgent truce. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News, in Jerusalem.
This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim, next up on the programme. From Ukraine to Gaza and now Israel versus Iran, 3 major conflicts with no end in sight. Is President Trump's peacemaker promise collapsing?
First Minister, how are you?
Good morning. Good morning.
Nice to see you. How are you feeling?
Looking forward to getting into the parliamentary chamber.
Are you any further forward to making a decision?
No, it's an important day today.
All of the claims were in line with my parliamentary duties, so I'm making that clear to you, Conor.
He was a Scot through and through.
He was a very good politician.
Alex Salmond was controversial, he was a disruptor, but above all, he was respected.
Will you resign if you lose this week?
Again, I'm not planning to, of course, lose the vote of no confidence. I'm planning to win that vote of no confidence.
His face said it all.
My intention to stand down as party leader.
This is now a storm with deadly consequences. How are they feeling?
They're a bit scared at the minute. We've been told to evacuate.
How are you feeling?
Devastated.
Hundreds of homes were wiped out by flooding. I'm Conor Gillis, Sky's Scotland correspondent.
It was probably the darkest time in my life.
Scott is 5 years sober after a cocaine addiction left him close to death.
Scotland has a shameful record, worse than England, the worst in Europe.
Why not just say you failed? Because then you might get more respect from families who've lost loved ones.
This is where one of the UK's most prolific rapists thought he'd got away with murder.
Sky News can reveal that former sex workers had told police he was sexually violent.
My Emma.
Free wherever you get your news. It's over, isn't it?
The Americans say he is Rossi, a fraudster.
This has been one of the most bizarre cases ever heard in a courtroom in this country.
A dangerous murderer.
Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive Andrew Ennis after this?
She said she can forgive him, but as long as he's behind bars.
By doing the right thing, it's destroyed your life.
They terrorised me. They intimidated me.
I'm so grateful.
Sky News, the full story first.
It's a direct hit on the hospital. Absolute mayhem.
All the bays are full and they're all gunshot wounds. Absolute carnage here.
We hear a lot about the dead in this conflict, but there are going to be so many disabled people.
We could make a difference here and stop the war. And if we don't, I don't think there will be anything to come back to.
Turkey is burying its dead. Whole families died in this collapse. Generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
Anyone could say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News, get the full story first.
I'm Stephen Murphy and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin. The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks. If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Welcome back to Jerusalem. We're just going to look now at three of the world's biggest conflicts, Ukraine, Gaza and Israel versus Iran. All are escalating with few signs of peace. So where does that leave the agenda of President Trump, who'd promised to be a peacemaker and end wars with deals that only he can manage? Just have a look.
Shortly after I win the presidency, we will have that horrible war between Russia and Ukraine settled, maybe in 24 hours.
Soldiers are being killed on a daily basis at numbers that we haven't seen in decades. And it would be nice to end that war.
A half-baked negotiator could have settled this years ago. We're looking at Gaza, and we got to get that taken care of. A lot of people are starving. There's a lot of bad things going on. The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it. We continue to work to get that war ended as quickly as possible. People of Gaza deserve a much better future.
Iran is not winning this war. They should talk, and they should talk immediately before it's too late.
What specifically is better than a ceasefire? What are you looking for here?
An end, a real end. My proudest legacy will be that of a peacemaker and unifier. That's what I want to be.
Well, Katie McFarland served as Deputy National Security Advisor during President Trump's first term. Thank you very much, Katie, for joining us here on the programme. President Trump, throughout his campaign, said that he would resolve the war in Ukraine with Russia in 24 hours. He said that he would find a solution to the war in Gaza. He said that he would get a deal between Iran and Israel. In fact, it feels like all three of these conflicts have escalated rather than de-escalated under President Trump.
You know, the thing about President Trump is always take him seriously, but you don't have to take him literally. So when he says, I'm going to end the war in Ukraine, I'm going to end the fighting in Gaza, when I'm going to make sure Iran doesn't get nuclear weapons and have a deal there, he's going there. But he may change, he may tack, he may change different directions. If he tries something that isn't working, he'll try something else. But the goal remains the same. So if I look, for example, at Ukraine, the initial thought was that he could pressure, using economic pressure against Russia and against Ukraine to get them to the negotiating table. And once they would get to the negotiating table, they'd find their way to a deal. It doesn't seem to have worked. It has worked with Zelensky and Ukraine. The U.S. now has a rare earth minerals deal with Ukraine, which is about as good a security guarantee for their future as Ukraine could get. We just haven't gotten Russia to the table. But that doesn't mean President Trump won't get Russia.
Isn't that crucial, though? What? You know, Ukraine was always in the, the U.S. column. It wasn't sort of difficult ultimately to bring Ukraine round. It was Russia whose arm needed to be twisted.
You know, look, when President Trump first started talking to Zelensky, the attitude of the Ukrainians was, well, wait, America, you promised to give us everything for us, whatever we need for as long as it takes. Well, no, we're not going to give Ukraine everything for as long as it takes. That isn't in America's national security interest. We can't afford to do it, first of all. And why should we do it, especially when our European allies are not stepping up as they are capable of doing? So getting Ukraine now to the point where Zelensky and Trump are talking to each other, they've agreed pretty much on the major terms of an agreement. Russia hasn't gotten there yet. But again, this is iterative. You can't just say, with a magic wand, oh, it's over. These countries negotiate. They have to feel pressure. One of the ways we could pressure Russia, but President Trump has not yet imposed it, but he could, is secondary sanctions against Russia, really to bankrupt Russia, to make sure that whatever oil they have and they're selling on the international market doesn't get sold. That would bring Russia's economy pretty much to its knees very quickly. But I would also say with any of these,
Katie,
now we're, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. You finish your sentence and then I'll come in.
No, I would say whether you're talking about Gaza And Gaza, I think, is a subset and a subsidiary of the Iranian situation, and Israel and Iran. You know, when people say, "Well, what's President Trump going to do? Is he going to send in those bunker buster bombs and get the United States involved with Israel?" You know, wait, he's looking at the situation. Take a deep breath. Israel hasn't asked us to join the fight with them. They've always said, give us what we need to defend ourselves by ourselves. And so far, in day 5, whatever we're in, you're there, you're seeing it. Israel now owns the skies above Iran. And whatever attacks Iran was able to do with its missiles, it seems that Iran, we thought Iran had a couple thousand missiles. It reports now that they have only 200. So Israel's doing pretty well without us.
Well, and I don't think anyone's doubting that Israel has complete superiority over the skies, and they've dismantled and decapitated the regime, top leadership of the regime. But President Trump didn't really offer a clear strategy from the beginning. It wasn't clear where he stood. And now, today, we're seeing a series of statements where he's talking about surrender, where he's talking about knowing where the supreme leader is. Is that just sort of cosplay, you know, and sort of upping the rhetoric rather than offering any kind of clear strategy about what it is that the United States' position is in all of this?
You know, if you're in the middle of a negotiation, in the middle of a war, do you want to really telegraph every step that you're taking, whether it's with regard to Russia and Ukraine or whether it's with regard to Israel and Iran? I think he's keeping his options open. And when every time he's been asked, and they've asked him these direct questions, what are you going to do? What's the plan? He's always said, let's see, let's wait and see. He doesn't think events have played themselves out yet. I mean, for example, what's Israel going to do? Israel's shown us time and again, they just keep pulling rabbits out of the hat. What are Israel's plans with the Fordo, the facilities deep underground? People say, oh, you have to have American weapons and bombs to destroy those. Maybe, but is there another way? Is there a cyber attack that Israel could pull off?
Yeah, so Israel has presented a serious, element of surprise with all of this, and we saw the same thing in Lebanon as well. And yet, President Trump is almost coming out with the plans by saying we're going to go after the supreme leader. Maybe we are, maybe we're not. Almost exposing things beforehand through a series of statements and putting himself at the center of this conversation rather than, discussing actual strategy and plans.
Well, if you're the supreme leader, isn't President Trump kind of scrambling with your brain right now, where you've seen a number of the guys sitting to your left, the guys sitting to your right have now been vaporized? So if you're the supreme leader, what pressure could President Trump bring? Could he bring the pressure of, hey, look, you might be insecure in your position. We're not going for anybody's regime change. That's not what America does. We don't send in the Marines to try to topple leaders. But if the Iranian people or the Iranians within the inner circle are looking at the situation and saying, maybe this is not the tack we want to take. Maybe there's a palace coup. Again, let events play themselves out. If the United States says, here's what we're going to do, this is not our war. Although we might get involved in the sense of maybe we give the bunker buster bombs to Israel.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, Katie. We've got 20 seconds to off air, but I'm grateful that you've joined us and shared your thoughts with us.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for tonight's edition of The World. I'll be back with the news at 10 in the next few minutes. Good night.